Well, we have a pretty big issue in the country that isn't really being discussed as much as it should. And it's the simple fact that kids don't know how to read. If you've been anywhere on the internet, whether it be TikTok or Facebook or news articles, you'll know that kids today simply just don't know how to read. It's a growing epidemic, if you will. Across the country, reading levels are down, and many teachers and school districts have been sounding the alarms. They've been doing this for the past 5 to 6 years. Post-pandemic, this has only gotten worse.
But I don't understand why they're not stressing to y'all how bad it is. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are... I'm going to just say this. I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level.
These kids can't read. They can't decode. They have no vocabulary, no background knowledge. I've never seen anything like it.
I don't know about you, but a society that is literate, that knows how to read, is incredibly important for literally every single thing that our society is built from. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. I want to listen to a bunch of opinions from teachers that are on the front lines, if you will. We're going to take a look at several graphs that illustrate just how horrible a situation this currently is. We're going to take a look at 3 major factors on just why reading levels have declined so much recently. First, I really want to dive into just how the socioeconomic levels of students is really affecting their ability to learn, and just how drastic of a difference it is between rich kids and poor kids. And yes, of course, we finally have to talk about smartphones and social media. It seems like it's a common theme on the channel, but we're going to talk about just how destructive it is in a learning setting, which should be pretty much common sense. And lastly, I want to talk about the side effects we're feeling from the law of No Child Left Behind. This law that was introduced in the early 2000s has had very negative effects on the classroom and just teachers' morale and ability to teach. We're going to dive into that as well. So our first item of business here, socioeconomic levels. Across the country, we've seen wealth inequality get worse and worse every single year. The pandemic hasn't helped. Inflation has not helped. And all this is having huge negative effects on students' ability to learn. Simply put, poorer kids are having way lower test scores. They're having way lower reading scores. As a result, they're not learning how to read. Many students are going into 7th grade having a 2nd grade reading level. It should be completely unacceptable that this is even a case, but it's growing. It's a growing problem across the country, and it's a problem that hasn't gotten the attention of, I guess, lawmakers or the general public. These are real issues. This is going to affect society for decades to come. If you don't have a well-educated society that knows how to read, you're going to have pretty damning effects, whether it be political ramifications or economic ramifications. You're going to have a whole host of problems. So let's listen to what teachers had to say about this.
When I tell you that these babies cannot read, they cannot write, and they cannot comprehend, I'm not being funny. I'm being dead serious. It doesn't exist. I have kids constantly asking me, how do I spell window? How do I spell important?
What is wrong with these kids? Not in a bad way, but like, I don't know how to reach them. I feel like one lesson that used to take a day is taking a week now. The attention span.
Kids can't read. Are you on Kids Can't Read TikTok? Because I sure am. I've seen no less than 20 teachers on here say straight up their students cannot read. Not like 6-year-olds, like 10, 12, 15-year-olds. This woman, she's a band teacher, a middle school band teacher. She said kids are using symbols. Like they're making up symbols and just being like, are these letters? Because they don't know letters.
So yeah, it's not looking good, especially for those students that are falling behind. It's like when you start to fall behind, you're going to fall behind throughout the rest of your educational journey, all the way to high school and eventually adulthood. It's a never-ending cycle, and it's a cycle that seems to be becoming a lot more common as the years go on. I mean, think about it. We're having this huge level of economic inequality in the country. Many parents aren't worried about their students' education. They're worried about feeding those students. They're worried about feeding their families. A lot of instances where parents are working 2 to 3 jobs. We have other unfortunate situations where there's broken families. In those cases, education is the bottom of the totem pole in level of importance. So yeah, we have a lot of issues when it comes to this. This is a very complicated subject. And wealth inequality is definitely contributing to lower reading scores as a result. And this wealth divide, it's only getting worse. You know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you maybe had 3 or 4 students that were experiencing financial insecurities. Now you're having half the class experiencing financial insecurities. And you're having those parents working way more hours and working way more jobs. They don't have the time, or they don't really have the passion to help get their kids to learn. They don't have the time to encourage or monitor their kids to pick up a book and read, to pick up a magazine, to, you know, even play a game that has something to do with reading. They have those now. But here's the flip side. If we take a look at rich suburbs or rich cities, the kids that are going to these wealthier schools, these schools that are, you know, top 10%, they're actually seeing higher test scores historically. I mean, it makes sense. We're in the age of technology. So the kids that are going to these wealthier schools, they're going to have way more access to learning tools and learning capabilities compared to their peers. And if you take a look at this instance, the parents that are in these wealthier communities and these wealthier suburbs, a lot of times they're working from home or they're hybrid, which means that they have more time and effort to put to their children so they can learn to read, or, you know, get better grades in school, to get better grades on that SAT or ACT, which is pivotal to decide which college they go to, which in the long run, we know that going to college on average does garner better economic benefits for that student in the long run. So we're constantly becoming a country of have and have-nots. That's basically what's going on here. In every aspect of society, those that have the resources and the money are getting ahead faster and are getting ahead at an easier pace. Whereas those that don't have the adequate economic resources are falling behind, and falling behind fast. So our second instance here, it has to be smartphones and social media. Now, this is something that we've talked about on this channel a good bit. The simple fact that social media and smartphones has had a very damning effect on the young generation, and it's having an even worse effect on their test grades and on their reading skills. This graph shows just how when smartphones were introduced, the reading scores nationally decreased. They declined, and at a huge rate here. I would say that there's a huge correlation here. We could say this is coincidence, but you see it right there. Smartphones arrived and then the test scores started to go down. On top of many other issues, I think this is one of the major issues that we're seeing across the country. Many school districts have come forward and said that they're going to ban phone usage outright. This is starting to become a way more popular trend. I mean, about 5 to 7 years ago, when I was in high school, the idea of banning smartphones wasn't really talked about. It was kind of this taboo idea. Now it's something that a lot of educational agencies and organizations are advocating. I mean, take a listen to these teachers.
Arizona man who's been teaching for more than a decade is quitting his job, saying he just can't compete against students who are glued to their phones.
I want everyone to know how exhausting it is for a school teacher to shoulder all of that. Because, by the way, I'm also supposed to be teaching biology and helping inspire them into science careers.
We are seeing all over this app cases of teachers being literally assaulted and placed into the hospital for taking a cell phone. However, in Florida, they just passed a law that says no cell phones in class. Orange County school districts in Florida took it a step further and basically said your cell phone can't even be out at lunch or in the hallway. And over the first couple months of this school year, they said that 20 or more cell phones were confiscated each day from students until they got into the habit of knowing, I'm not trying to wait for an extra 15 minutes in line at the end of the day to get my phone back. And the results are exactly as we expected. Students are participating more. Their grades are going up. bullying has decreased, and the students really don't care anymore. The most riveting thing that they've said is that they think it's excessive to not be able to be on their phone during lunch. But in exchange, they like that they've actually been socializing with their friends.
The students, they just don't want to learn, and they don't want to read. As a result, those reading scores are going to be pretty lousy if they're just on TikTok or if they just want to watch whatever. You can definitely make the argument, and studies have shown that increased phone usage in young adults and children is definitely having negative effects on their attention span. As a result, they're not going to want to read that book that is 300 pages long. If you talk to teachers out there, they're going to tell you that you walk into a classroom, everyone's on their phone. No one's picking up a book. Not many students are even doing their homework or even paying attention to the instructor in that class. It's a huge problem going across the entire country. You're taking away hours and hours every day of learning, which could be pretty beneficial to that student in the short term and the long term. Instead, they're just watching or reading a bunch of random content that has absolutely no benefit to them. Let's be honest. And the next thing that we need to talk about is just how No Child Left Behind had a very negative effect on the entire education journey of students. It had a very negative effect on teachers' morale and their ability to teach in the classroom. Let's take a look at several opinions out there.
No Child Left Behind left every child behind. And if you don't know what that is, Google it. I'm a teacher from that era. Late 99s, early 2000s. Good old George Bush. He thought that legislating No Child Left Behind would get every child to succeed, when in fact, it just punished teachers and brought standardized testing to the forefront. So now we can't really teach. We're teaching to a test. Kids are not learning. We're all going through the motions.
No Child Left Behind truly disservice the kids that are actually doing their work. A lot of the kids that would typically be held back typically don't have developmentally appropriate behaviors and ways of interacting with their peers. And so oftentimes they become distractions in the classroom where the teacher has to focus on them and they can't focus on the other kids that are at grade level. And now they need to get those kids up to par, and that disservices the other kids who actually did their work and deserve to be in their grade level. Not the ones that don't come to class, don't do homework, get zeros, and get passed along. No. And because they reteach the same thing to these high-performing students so that the ones behind can catch up, you see behaviors start to form in the kids who were doing just fine because now they're bored. Now you're working with students that aren't on grade level, that don't even want to do the work, that have to be the priority. And now as a result, the students that were doing everything right have now picked up bad behaviors because they're bored.
So yeah, they really identified their disdain with No Child Left Behind, which was a law that was enacted under Bush's first term in the early 2000s. Its entire purpose was to kind of make sure that, well, no student was left behind. But as a result, it's definitely made the classroom a way more chaotic place. It's made testing culture the norm in many districts. It's made it to where tests are more important than the actual content you learn in school. People around my age were a direct result of No Child Left Behind. We basically went to school throughout its entire existence. And I just remember tests were just so important. It was the way that school districts got a lot of their funding. It's the way that the teachers and the administrators got their kudos and got their seal of approval that they were doing a good job. But in reality, us students, we weren't really having the best time. So now you have this test-taking culture on top of this newer generation that is on their phones constantly, that has a lower attention span. You have a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. Lower attention span and lower eagerness to learn on top of a testing culture. It's kind of just a recipe for disaster. And teachers definitely agree with that. So yeah, that's the world that we're living in right now. Lower test scores and lower reading scores are definitely going to have a negative effect on society in the long term. There's absolutely no doubt that a well-educated society has great benefits for everyone involved. And if you have less people in that society that are educated, you're bound to have a lot of problems. And For our sake, a lot of these people that are not that well educated are pretty young right now, but in 10 to 20 years, these young people, they're going to be adults, and they're going to be active members of society. And a uneducated society is bound to have very negative ramifications for all of us. When we say an uneducated society, I really don't mean people that are not choosing to go to college. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong if you don't go to college. We're talking about the students that have a 5th grade reading level when they're about to graduate high school. That's a huge problem. Those are the types of uneducated situations that we're talking about here. It's the people that don't even know their geography. They don't know that Canada is north of the United States. They don't even know who the US president is or the past president. Those are very simple things that everyone should know, but a lot of these people are going to start to become adults not knowing the most basic things of society. But like we expressed earlier in the video, it's not all doom and gloom. We do have students that are like geniuses. These are students that are more intelligent than any other students before them. They're like mini Einsteins because they have all these resources and tools at their disposal. They're having, high school reading levels in elementary school. There's a lot of instances like that, but I want to hear what you guys think about this situation. Should we be worried as a society and a country on the declining reading levels of students today? Is this something that we should be worried about? Let me know in the comments section below. Be sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. It really shines a spotlight on issues like this. Well guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back with another video next week. Stay informed out there.